Hello guys, this is our third video in the Intro to Statistics unit, and we're going to be talking a lot about experimental design. So as a quick review, let's look at what observational studies are, observational versus what an experimental study would be. Experimental. Okay, so an observational study is when you simply observe. The researcher is simply looking at what's going on and recording data. They are not, doing anything that would impose or, get different results. So let's look at an example. You are standing outside at the entrance of, your school, and you want to see how many people, how many students come to school wearing red t-shirts. You want to see if the red t-shirts is a trend. So you stand outside of your school for like a week every morning, and you see how many students are wearing a red shirt, and you record that in your data collection. So in the observational study, you are simply observing without manipulating data. Manipulating. So an experimental study is when the researcher deliberately imposes, something that would affect the data. So let's look at an example of this. So when you have an experimental study, you will have two groups, so group A and group B. You'll have more than one group basically. And one of them is going to be your control group, so control, and the second one is going to be your experimental group. Experimental. Okay, so let's say you have designed a new pill that would help reduce migraines. So control group A would get a pill, a placebo. So placebo, which isn't a real pill. They're going to get a fake pill that contains just sugar. And then, group B is going to get the pill that you've designed to help reduce migraines. So they are the experimental. So you're trying to see, does the pill really have a greater significance in reducing migraines at the end of the study? You're going to be comparing the results of these two groups. So this would be researcher is influencing data. Okay. So you're doing something to, find the data, or you're trying to find evidence for certain things. So that's the difference between observational study and experimental. So looking into our variables now. So let's look at what variables are, or confounding variables. So confounding variables are variables or things that affect your data that would, it doesn't really mean, it would change, the meaning of the data. So for example, going back to our pill experiment, we have to make sure that, people, they're the same age group, because age group, if you give the pill to maybe people who are 12, they're going to have different reactions than someone who is 56. So age is a confounding variable in this experiment. Another one could be time of day you're giving these migraines, because usually people have migraines, maybe someone has a migraine at the end of the day, like, they're coming back from work and, they were stuck in traffic. So time of day is a confounding variable as well. Time. And there are so many more. So confounding variables, these are just examples from this experiment. But confounding variables affect results of data. They're just lurking variables. So another word is lurking. So they're in the back, they're there. Sometimes the researcher might know they're there, and they might, adjust the experiment. And sometimes they don't really know, okay, this is causing my results to be unexpected. So affects the study, and you get a change, and this affects your data, affects the study and data. Okay, so now let's look at different terms. So we found out confounding variables or lurking. Let's look at what the word experimental units means. Experimental units. So the experimental units are your subjects. Who is this experiment about? It answers the question who. So who are the subjects, or who are the people that this represents, this experiment represents? And this is basically the people. So the subjects would be the people in this example about the two types of drugs or pills. So the next thing to know that the word subject is only when the data is about people. It could be about plants. In that case, you wouldn't say the word subject. You would just say the experimental units are plants. But if there were people, like in this case, you would say the subject in this study are the people, or the number of people. Let's say there were 30 people in each group. So 30 here and 30. So you would say the subjects in this study were the 60 people. Okay, moving on to our next term, which are the treatments. They also refer to the groups. So you're talking about the different kinds of groups. So groups, or in this case we have treatment A and treatment B. You're splitting them. How are you splitting them? So that answers the question, how are the subjects or experimental units, or the experimental units split? Okay, so in this case, like I mentioned, there are 30 people in treatment A, where there are the control and receiving the placebo, which is not the real pill, and 30 people in group B, or treatment B, is basically the group that receives your migraine pill. So this would be the group A, comma, group B. So, and then you would make sure you're specifying that this group receives placebo, and this one receives migraine pill. Okay, great. So now that we learned what treatments are, okay, now let's look at the words explanatory, variable, and the word response variable. So when you're recording your data, so you've collected all your data and you want to, put it into a graph, be able to analyze it. So let's say we have a graph like this, and right? So let's say you want to see whether hand span, so the width of your hand, affects typing speed. So hand span Span and typing speed. Typing speed on a computer. So now you're probably wondering, how do you know that, handspan goes at the bottom and then typing speed goes up here? Well, handspan, you're just trying to see if handspan affects typing speed. So this right here, oops, okay. So the handspan is affecting this. So whatever is being affected, so the typing speed is the affected value, that is the Y, which is the response. And, the handspan is the X. So the explanatory is the handspan. Another way to say this is the handspan explains typing speed. And, the typing speed is a response for handspan.